Here's the issue. Most of these e-commerce brands, they only know me, Richard Jones, because of the email that I used when I subscribed to them and the device that I was on at that time. But with multiple different devices, we have multiple different emails. What Wunderkind does is two things. If you're in the database, but the brand didn't realize that actually Richard Jones has this device or this other email, you've still got my opt-ins. You can still actually do a high intent message based on what you know about me. If you don't have the opt-in, our software will find the right time with the right message and the right incentive to pop up in that session to go, give us your email, give us your text. So we help build the opted-in lists of these brands, and it's through those two functions that we're able to look at a business and go, you're leaving X amount of money on the table, let us drive this outcome, the outcome being e-commerce revenue.
Richard, welcome to the DTC Podcast. I love it when we get to focus on hot takes. I'm excited to get into Wunderkind. You're the CRO of Wunderkind, a software that aims at replacing humans from the process of driving revenue. So you're like the self-checkout people that are teaching people how to use the self-checkout at the grocery store because you'll replace yourself eventually with AI. But I was just going over your background. I was like, okay, what are Richard's bona fides here in the SaaS space? And like on LinkedIn, I had to hit the more button, more than once to see the level of your career. It's like you're coming up on 30 years in sort of the SaaS tech space. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, before SaaS was a thing, when I started, when you shipped a CD, to a client, and they took the CD and then loaded the software and ran it all on their servers. So yeah, it's been a long time. In fact, my first job was in a marketing agency, working for the IBM account, and it was on the this was back in 1996 or something like that, 97, and it was for the launch of their e-commerce software suite, and we were all looking at each other, what? E-commerce? What's that? What is this e-commerce thing?
100%. Okay, well, let's start. Just lay it out there. Start with your bold claim, and then walk us through a bit of that history of SaaS to where we are today and where you see it going.
Yeah. The bold claim is that I think we're going to, or we're already entering in to a generational cull of software vendors. And I've been through one in my career so far, which was the generational cull of the on-premise software vendors that were replaced by the software as a service vendors like SaaS. And it was a unique combination of some technological advancements, but really it was the business model change that kind of created the generational cull back then.
Take us back there before we go into it. Take us back into because I think a lot of this audience probably was not part of the SaaS world when it was on premise. So just I'm thinking of Mad Men. I'm thinking the episode where in Mad Men they get a computer, and it's like this punch card thing that they have on premise. Like that would have been like the proto SaaS in a way, right?
Yeah. So basically, as I said, when I first started my career in software, we were literally shipping CDs with the software on it to customers, and the buyer of software in organizations was the CIO and the IT department. And the reason why they were the buyer of basically all business applications was because they actually used to have to run those business applications. So the IT teams were massive. The CIOs were like really super powerful in terms of their roles in the organizations, because if anybody wanted software to do anything, you would have to go to the CIO. The CIO would have to then run that software. So they'd take the CD, they'd run all the hardware boxes in the servers and make sure that the software was up. And, it was a very different environment. And it, all roads led to the CIO. And, the way that you sold software back then, you would basically pay for a license, for a perpetual license that would allow you to take that software from the CD and run it for as long as you wanted. And you'd pay about 15 to 18% a year of the overall amount that you paid for the license, the software, in maintenance to the organization. But it was the IT team that really had to run all this software on servers and manage all of that infrastructure. And that was great, that worked. Many companies had rise and fall in that environment. And, when I was started and things like CRM, the biggest company in the space was Siebel, and it was huge, and they were a massive, massive company. And then something changed. And what changed was the cloud. So that was the technological disruption. And basically what the cloud was obviously a way of having all of these hardware boxes and these servers that you'd run software on that you could access in the cloud. And they were run by people like Amazon Web Services and various other large technology companies that created, ran these cloud infrastructures. And so what you then had was software developers, and Mark Benioff from Salesforce was really the kind of main, the first driver of this. But I worked for a company called Eloqua, which was kind of almost second or third out the gate and creating these SaaS-based software. Basically what they did is, we're not going to ship a CD. We're going to create our software in the cloud, and we're going to allow businesses to basically just subscribe to that software, in yearly contracts. So software as a service was born. You don't need the IT team to run all the infrastructure and manage all this stuff and support these applications. You can just access it over the internet as a business user and run it software as a service. So what it meant was you could, instead of having to have everything bought through the CIO, now the CMO could buy applications that were basically a service, a subscription service for marketers in that department, and any business department could directly buy these subscriptions for their employees to access software. And basically what really killed Siebel and why Salesforce is the massive company that it is today is that Siebel, like it's basically its entire generation of other vendors, didn't make the transition from the on-premise software world with a buyer that was the CIO to this software as a service world where it was any business line of business C-suite could buy the software and subscribe, and they couldn't. And so you had this generational cull back then, and it really was. I mean, all of the vendors you see today, they're all software as a service vendors. They're people that have come as part of that technological revolution. And the revolution was technology and it was business model. And the reason why the business model was better is because, one, you don't have all the costs of actually managing all the server and hardware infrastructure, but it's also much more flexible, right? If you want a perpetual license, all right, if you get it wrong, you just spend millions of dollars on a bit of software that you can have access to forever, but who cares? It's
if it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. You need to change. Whereas in SaaS, you could, 1 year, or sometimes even pay as you go. And, if it's not working for you, you can change. So it was much, much more flexible for businesses in the software as a service world.
You'd have seats for all your team members, right? You'd have your,
exactly.
and you'd have all these human interfaces where it was kind of decentralized as well. Different parts of the company could purchase it, and it could be used more easily by everyone in the company, which leads us, I think, to our evolution that we're going through now.
Yeah, so what is this second generational cull? And probably not surprisingly, it's artificial intelligence, it's AI. And, people might go, well, why would that be a generational cull for software as a service vendors? Surely they can just, take AI capabilities and embed it into their services. And what you've really seen in the, last 18 months is a raft of different announcements about AI from traditional software as a service vendors. I did a talk not that long ago at e-tail where I really was saying that, why, it was entitled, I think, something like why nearly everything MarTech vendors say about AI is wrong, right? And the reason why I was being so controversial is because the news was getting dominated by software as a service vendors saying, oh, AI, big new thing. Let's, change my name. So it's, company
AI.
X.ai.
Yeah.
So there's this obvious kind of marketing ploy. So let's slap AI all over the website. But when
AI
you actually
washing.
look into exactly.
AI washing.
AI washing. That's really what it was. It was AI washing. But you actually look at it and go, what are you actually saying? What are you coming out with? What they're really coming out with is essentially co-pilots, right? It's things where AI is making the job of the human, which is at the center of the workflow of software as a service. It's about subscriptions to seats for humans to do things. And so the AI is like a co-pilot to make the individual that much more efficient. But here's where the problem is. And the problem is all of those software as a service vendors that are basically subscription based, it's subscription for seats. Seats is a human doing something, and their whole application is built around a human performing a function. And so AI being slapped on the top with a co-pilot to make the human at the center of the workflow slightly more efficient is completely missing the point about how disruptive AI actually is. Because AI, the promise of AI, is that you can have an intelligence and a compute function which is way, way superior to that of a human.
And broader. I think that's the other area. When you go with this model that we have now, even Apple with their announcements, I saw in real time they eliminated hundreds of little apps, right? By just integrating AI as a co-pilot. So that's that's like a mini wave that's happening in the app space. And what you're talking about is this bigger leap, which is like once we remove humans from the equation a little bit more and just go to like an outcomes-based software, is kind of what you're saying, right?
Exactly. That's what it's all about. So, if you're putting the human at the center of the workflow, you're kind of putting in not a weakness, but there is an element of that.
It's that big picture thing. I was thinking about it with my brother. It's that big picture. Like we function well in day to day, but it's that broad perspective that you'd want AI to have. And when you have it just as a co-pilot, it lends itself to these individual moments where it helps you do the one thing you're trying to do better. But really what AI is going to do for us is show us that big picture that we have a harder time seeing and saying, if you want to get to that big picture, you got to do all these things. That's the way I see AI kind of working for people on a number of levels.
A good example of that is we all come with human bias to decisions that we make. AI doesn't have human bias. AI can actually compute far more variables than we ever can in milliseconds and make hundreds of thousands of decisions in a blink of an eye and execute on them and get results. If you're putting a human in the central workflow, what you're essentially doing is slowing down the execution process. And, that's just the reality of the situation. So if you think about what is that actually going to do to the vendors in the space, I think similar to what we had with the on-premise to cloud revolution, you're going to have existing software as a service vendors thinking, within the same framework that they have developed their application, which is the human-centered application they're going to put on the co-pilots. You're then going to have a set of competitors, which are basically, in the majority, not all, but it will be mainly new startups, which are not unencumbered from the idea of subscriptions and seats and a business model that was associated with software as a service. They're going to come at it and go, okay, AI can actually take human out of the workflow. AI can actually drive outcomes. So if AI can drive outcomes, why would the business model be about seats and subscriptions? Why wouldn't it be about the outcome? So if, for example, the software is around driving e-commerce revenue, you mentioned Shopify, why wouldn't I pay for the outcome of e-commerce revenue? Wouldn't I, if the AI can generate X additional incremental revenue for me, then I'm going to pay Y. It's an outcome-based service. And I think that technological disruption is going to unleash a business model disruption that will be the generational cull of the software service vendors.
So help me understand. I want to get into Wunderkind a bit more too, but just even from something like a HubSpot or a Salesforce, what are some ways? Because I'm having trouble in getting palpably understanding where humans exit that equation. Because right now you've got all these people that are maybe organizing their sales pipeline, let's say. They are the inputs. They are the people that go out and sell. What would an AI in 3 years Salesforce kind of look like, or how would it work in the way you're describing?
Yeah, it's a very
That's $1 trillion question, I guess. I'm asking you to come up with on the spot, but
yeah, I think if you take something like Salesforce, I think the way that they'll actually approach it is they will have AI agents. You think about kind of call centers that are human orientated, that are connected to CRM systems, that are, it's software to power the human at the center of the workflow in, for example, call center / CRM type operations. They'll be modeling AI agents. So, there won't be no human in the call center. Will be AI agents that are actually fulfilling the interaction, voice, text, whatever the channel is. And I think probably the temptation for those companies would be to mimic the seat-based world they live in and go, okay, well, these are now AI agents, these that are fulfilling the seats. But I also think that it's fundamentally a mistake, and we'll actually miss the opportunity that is out there, which is forget about that. Think about the outcome. So the outcome should really be how much more efficient, what's the customer satisfaction lift that I can have, how many, what costs I can take out of my business with actually moving away from a human-centered workflow. What additional upsell or cross-sell or revenue generating things will AI give me in that call center infrastructure, for example. I think the companies that actually do that go down the outcome based, if you're the buyer, you'll be like, well, okay, yeah, I know I'm replacing humans with AI agents, but who cares? The AI agent doesn't have a cost in the same way that a human does. So why should I pay the amounts that I have been paying for essentially swapping a human to an AI agent? I just want to pay for the incremental lift to my business KPIs. And that's where I think the traditional folks, software, Salesforce and Good, will probably struggle.
Now, walk me through, I mentioned in the intro that, this interesting position you're in, you're the CRO of Wunderkind, which is a software that is aiming to, drive the outcome of driving more revenue from all these disparate tool sets. So walk me through how Wunderkind is thinking about this AI future and how it sounds like you're going to be on the right side of the Cull is the way you're thinking.
Yeah. And sometimes luck plays a part. It's not always judgment. Sometimes it's luck. And, I think with it, when it comes to Wunderkind, we have to recognize that we've been dealt a lucky hand. And the lucky hand is Wunderkind itself has been a managed service. That's at the center of how the company operates its business model. So why does that matter? Well, as a managed service, our customers are relying on Wunderkind's people and expertise and technology to drive an outcome for them. And so we don't have lots and lots of users that every day get up and use Wunderkind, our clients, that to go to this AI-driven future, you're going to have to go to a user conference and go, hey, the next generation of the platform basically means none of you have got jobs. You can imagine how difficult that user conference is actually going to be. We don't have that. So structurally, we don't have that encumbered problem that a user base for humans at your clients is just has. That's difficult. The second part, which was judgment at the time, but not necessarily when it was set up 10 years ago, about the AI-driven future. And that was, Wunderkind was unique in the sense that it had a commercial model that was not in the same way that the software as a service model worked. It was actually very, very unique. It was based entirely on outcomes. So when we speak to a prospect, we will basically take a quick look at their business, and then we will give them a projection of the revenue increase that we will drive for them over their operations today, and enter into what we call an initial period, essentially like a pilot, where we guarantee hitting a revenue threshold. And if we do that in the 4-month pilot, it will trigger an auto extend period. And if we didn't hit that, not only do they don't have to extend, we'll carry on working for free until we've generated that return for them from that initial investment. So we de-risked the buying process and made it about outcomes. And that, for AI, just so happens to be the perfect model for the way that a business should be operating their commercial model in the world of AI. And again, we don't have that human issue that a lot of the software service vendors do.
It was just on that SaaS roundtable that I did with Tomer and Taylor Holiday. It was very interesting. And it was about, it's so much of a better position for SaaS to be in on that revenue generation side, because it's instant. You can justify yourself. You've built that into your business model that you justify your presence. Whereas other people that are like adding more, seats for customer service or things like this that don't directly impact the bottom line, it's tougher to make that justification to the organization.
Yeah, it really is. And so, what is AI doing for us? Well, it's supporting the business model, and it's basically allowing us to then generate new revenue lines or higher returns for our business with completely AI generated campaigns and content and deliverables that drive e-commerce revenue. So it's really just expanding the kind of commercial outcome that we can drive for customers without any of these natural kind of issues that the traditional software service vendors have on commercial models and human-based workflows.
Just for those who have been listening and have loved this incendiary conversation, but want to know specifically what Wunderkind does, because I think that's what as AI gets a bigger part of it, and as it moves to this outcome-based thing, it becomes harder to describe it. And so I'm curious, describe it exactly for people, and then also let us know what are the areas that become unnecessary from your stack when you have this piece in it.
Yeah, definitely. So. Very simply, Wunderkind is a global performance marketing solution, and it's powered by AI, data, and identity. Those are the three pillars of how we drive the outcomes that we do today. And essentially that will help customers to acquire and then retain customers via their own channels at an unprecedented scale. So to walk you through it, how does that actually work? So if you're an e-commerce brand, for example, you may be paying, a whole variety of different paid media channels to drive traffic to your e-commerce site. And as we know, that's becoming increasingly more expensive to drive that traffic to your site, and you're hoping they convert. Only about typically 5% of the traffic that you drive to your site actually converts in any given session. So 95% of that traffic you've paid for doesn't actually convert, bounces off the site. And retailers, e-commerce brands have been caught in this ever more expensive advertising world, having to drive more and more traffic, of which the vast majority of it doesn't actually purchase anything on that session.
Especially with cookie length getting shorter as well. So you get that, you lose all of that data, that time value of the data. So yeah, it becomes...
Yeah, and targeting is more difficult, with the deprecation of third-party cookies. That whole business model is getting harder. What Wunderkind does is it has this huge identity network, which is powered because we also have an advertising side of our business. We run on many of the world's largest publishers. We've got many of the world's largest e-commerce vendors. So we have this huge network. And basically, when people come on and they give their email addresses and they land on a particular site, they are hydrating in a hashed anonymous way this identity network. And how it basically works is if somebody comes to your e-commerce site, for example, they land on your site as the e-commerce brand. What Wunderkind will do is in real time it will check, because we'll know it's hash, but we'll know it's Richard Jones, and we'll go L'Oreal. Do you actually know Richard Jones? We'll check in that CRM system straight away. It'll usually come back and say, yes or no. But here's the issue. Most of these e-commerce brands, they only know, me, Richard Jones, because of the email that I used when I joined their newsletter or subscribed to them, and the device that I was on at that time. But we have multiple different devices. We have multiple different emails, and the e-commerce brand may have Richard, they may have had Richard Jones in their CRM. They may have my opt-ins, but they didn't know me on this email or this device. And there's a really big chunk of traffic is actually in that category. And so we'll do two things. If you're in the database, but the brand didn't realize, that actually Richard Jones has this device or this other email, you've still got my opt-ins. You can still actually do a high intent message based on my behavior on the site and what you know about me, because we've correlated this session, this device to Richard Jones, and you have the opt-in. If you don't have the opt-in, we'll go, okay, you don't know Richard Jones on any device, or any email, so you need to collect his opt-ins. You can't just message him just because he landed on your site. You need to stay within this consent-based privacy world that we live in. So our software will find the right time with the right message and the right incentive to pop up in that session to go, give us your email, give us your text. Perhaps maybe there's a value exchange, like, exclusive access to exclusive content or a discount or whatever it may be. So we help build the lists and the opted-in lists of these brands if they don't actually know them. And it's through those two functions that we're able to look at a business and go, you're leaving X amount of money on the table. Let us drive this outcome and let us prove for you. And the outcome being e-commerce revenue.
And then how much input in this case are from the brands? Like it sounds like an always-on solution, but what's required as the input side of thing from brands?
Yeah, as I said, it's all done as a managed service. So we essentially will do the implementation, we'll do the integrations, we'll do the creative, because we have all the best practice and business logic from 13 years of doing this and knowing exactly how you drive performance. And then we've loaded all that data up into our LLMs, our AI engines that are then learning from all of this best practice and this huge volume of activity across all of these e-commerce sites. So to put it in context, we recognize about 9 billion devices every year in our identity network, about 1 billion opted in email addresses, and about 2 trillion events on these e-commerce sites, all being tracked by software. It's a huge data set with all the business logic that we've had built up over the years to train AI to then squeeze even more value from those sessions and those interactions with consumers.
Everyone wants to know about incremental revenue. So how do you know for sure that what you're driving is actually incremental revenue? You didn't just hit a great, sales campaign or something.
Yeah. So first question there is, all right, what does incrementality mean for the business that you might be speaking to? So how would you judge, that Facebook is incremental or, whatever channel you want? So that's the first question, because incrementality tends to be something that is quite fluid in a lot of businesses with how they actually judge incrementality. So establishing a baseline of incrementality is important. Now, there's 2 elements to this. There's one is when you're a new customer and you're coming on board, you'll typically be you'll be making a certain amount of revenue from triggered messaging as a program. And you see that it's all in the Google Analytics, it's in the data of what they're actually making. When you actually do a test program, what we're basically saying is you're not having to pay for any of the triggered revenue messaging that you're getting today from these operations. That's all baked into our commercial model. You're only going to pay to us a percentage based on the performance of the lift over and above that baseline of what you're driving today. So it's very, very binary. You run the test, you see, okay, did the revenue go up considerably? Yes or no? And we have all the projections where we think that's going to happen. In a customer that's been around for a long time, of course, baselines may change, ESPs may change. And so we can actually do incrementality tests that then split test and go, okay, great. Well, let's go off and to push 50% of the traffic off to, the triggered email via your ESP. Let's put 50% of the traffic by Wunderkind. What were the actual results in exactly the same period, so that you can have a very definitive incrementality test? Because these things are fluid. Like businesses change all the time. ESPs and technology changes all the time. And so we have to make sure that we're delivering value above and above whatever that baseline is at the time.
Who uses Wunderkind? Like who in our audience here, like in terms of scale, should be considering a tool like this?
Yeah, so we actually work with e-commerce brands that are doing anywhere from, $3.5–4 million of annual digital revenue, up to the Macy's and the Gucci's and the these huge kind of retail brands and e-commerce providers. So it's really that full gamut. I would say though that we are actually releasing a kind of like Wunderkind Express version of the platform just for Shopify small customers, so that it will be anyone from $1 million kind of up to $3.5 million, which is an area of the TAM that we haven't addressed before. That's going to be released later this year. It'll be fully self-service. It's just a very simple setup. Click through, deploy, it's off and running and providing a boost basically to your e-commerce revenue on Shopify for those smaller vendors.
Amazing. So I see you've got a link here to a identity playbook. If you want to know about this, you can go to wunderkind.co, and then we'll also have a link in the notes to your identity playbook. What would they expect in that identity playbook?
Yeah, I mean, it's really an educational piece, because as marketers are thinking about, all right, well, how are we going to survive and thrive with the deprecation of the third-party cookie, identity as a solution, along with AI and data, and how we personalize to consumers, and how we build our own our own channels, build our CRM lists, build our email and text opt-ins. this is going to be of a premium as we move away from the deprecation of third-party cookies. So it's an educational piece to really let people know about kind of how identity plays in this new future that we're all kind of moving into as everyone kind of shuts down support for the third-party cookie.
Very cool. And I think I'll throw if you don't mind, your LinkedIn profile here, just so people can gander at your amazing career.
I'm always happy to listen to the community and connect.
I couldn't let an AI podcast go without bringing up my pet AI idea, which is, my question is, how long until we all have persistent AI butlers who look out for our interests and allow us to put like our long-term goals into, and then have it be sort of looking out for our best interests in ways that we may not even be able to as humans? Because my theory is then we'll also need these to engage with all of the other AI nodes out there in a way, whether it's for eventually for voting or for all sorts of different things. I see this AI butler being our agent in this like network of other AIs.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've kind of already entered into that. I mean, with the Apple announcement, AI is going to be embedded into the operating system on everyone's phone. I mean, it's going to be inescapable. But there are other questions that we should deal with as a society about that, because how do you turn AI off? Should be a conversation that we're having. But I think we're kind of already there. This is imminent now. But for me, probably more interestingly, is I saw some crazy stuff coming out of China around the advancement in robotics. And when you actually take those humanoid robotics and put them with the power of AI, you really can have a butler that can actually physically do stuff for you. That's just a crazy concept.
I'm always looking for someone to hit with tennis, and if I could just get an AI tennis partner, robotic tennis partner, that would be pretty good. I'd be into that.
Be good, challenge me, but always make sure I eventually win.
Yeah, exactly. Oops, you missed it. I love that. Nice. Well, that's a great way to end it, man. Great to connect with you. I look forward to kind of keeping up with you on this space.
Likewise, and maybe we should do the session again in 2-3 years time and just see how quickly this generational cull has happened. Was I right? Was I wrong? Let's see.
Who are some of the first that might experience this? What are the tools that will become, obsolete the soonest?
So this is probably a little bit controversial, but if you think back to the last mass disruption you had, it was Siebel, it was CRM that was the first to go and get replaced with Salesforce. Will that be the same situation now? Is it going to be around CRM? And so you can't get a bigger company than Salesforce in the SaaS space. Will it be the really big behemoths, which are the first to get massively disrupted? Because that's the honeypots everyone are going after. Those are the guys with the biggest amount of revenue that could be disruptive. I'll give you one prediction. I think customer data platforms, CDPs, that's somewhat connected to the CRM world, will be the first to go, because you can look at it and go, well, why do you need a customer data platform that's, all of your customer data are in one place for humans to go and do analytics on? You don't. You'll have an AI layer that will then interact with all of your raw data and in that second decide what's the best next action, message, step for a consumer, based on what's going to perform the best. Why do you need a CDP? Why do you need that layer? That layer is defunct in an AI world. So, and it won't just be CDPs. That could just be the tip of the iceberg. But it's going to be interesting. An AI layer with accessing all your data, there's a lot of systems that are not now needed.
The big one that stares us in the face is ad buying, because all of the platforms are putting so much effort and emphasis on removing the ad buyer from the equation, right? Yeah. To just have it be this whole AI situation. So that's going to be, it's already being disrupted now, but it's interesting to watch the Twitter sphere, just like people rebelling against all the AI tools that don't work as well as the greasy marketers that know what to do. It's a trope in the tech space.
Yeah, and the other side of it, the generational cull, I genuinely believe is going to happen. But in some spaces, and perhaps these will be areas just like we saw with on-premise, it's quite surprising and it happens super quick. And in other areas, the human, the greasy human, as you put it, is harder to actually extricate from the chain of business. So it will be interesting, and I'm sure there will be surprises that come along.
It'll be like Hemingway said about how you go broke, very slowly in little drips and drabs, and then all at once.
And then suddenly all at once. Yeah. I think that's very apt. I think that's the way we'll see it, rock on.
Nice, Richard. Great chatting, man.
Appreciate it, Eric.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can do that right now at directtoconsumer.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.